in the 19 teens, terrible historical events troubled Yeats and most people in Europe, if not the world. World War I, 1914, 1918, rocked the consciousness of Europe. For centuries, there was a sense that civilization was progressing through science and technology toward a more peaceful and comfortable age, and that with time, eventually, through science and technology, we could live lives of civilized ease. Well, World War One horrifically shattered this dream. The machines that were meant to make life better were now killing soldiers at a rate unforeseen. So there's a sense of deep crisis in Western civilization at this time. Moreover, Yeats's own Ireland constantly in struggle with England and its efforts to colonize Ireland. In 1916, there was the Easter Uprising, where several Irish revolutionaries were killed, many of whom were the friends of Yeats. And Yeats wrote a really powerful poem about that tragedy called Easter 1916. So around this time, really from the 19 teens until his death in the 1930s, Yeats reassessed his idea of art. In the Romantic phase, he saw art as potentially escapist. Life's terrible, art can take us out of it. In his more conversational phase, he saw art as necessary, but also something quite difficult to make, but it might help us negotiate and make sense of the difficulty of everyday life. But during his final mythological period, Yeats envisioned art as a myth-making faculty. The artist can create, the poet can create linguistic patterns that don't look away from the horrors of history, but that look at the horrors of history, accommodate the horrors of history, make sense of the horrors of history. So in this way, poetry can take the place of religion. It can give us a sense that there is an order in the world. It can give us a sense that there is a structure to how history moves. And it can ultimately give us a sense that our actions have purpose and meaning. A prime example of this idea occurs in Yeats's poem from 1924 called LEDA and the SWAN. In this poem, Yeats describes the rape of Leda by Zeus in the form of a swan. Zeus takes the form of a swan, he rapes Leda, and from this rape, Helen of Troy, is born. So the idea in this poem is that somehow in this rape of Leda from this swan, the acme of classical Greek civilization is born, Helen, a manifestation of Greek ideal of beauty. And her manifestation of the Greek ideal of beauty ultimately leads to her being kidnapped from Agamemnon, her husband, by Paris, and it leads to the Trojan War. And the Trojan War brings out what is greatest in classical heroism, classical Greek heroism. We see Achilles, we see Odysseus, we see Agamemnon. And these men manifest the virtues of classical Greek culture, bravery, cunning, military prowess, a sense of beauty, a piety for the gods. But with the fall of Agamemnon, who is killed by his wife Clytemnestra, also an offspring of this rape, is the beginning of the end of Greek culture. A turn toward another cultural moment that will be the opposite of classical Greek culture. So the poem goes like this. it approaches a sonnet, but it's kind of an experimental sonnet. A sudden blow. The great wings beating still above the staggering girl, her thighs caressed by the dark webs, her nape caught in his bill, he holds her helpless breast upon his breast. So this is a description of the rape, where we see the blow, which is the moment of the violent act, and we see the swan with beating wings, and we see its dark webs holding this young woman, LEDA. It's horrifying. And then more. How can those terrified, vague fingers push the feathered glory from her loosening thighs? And how can body laid in that white rush but feel the strange heart beating where it lies? How can this young woman fight against this God? Put another way, how can this young woman fight against the powers that shape history? A shudder in the loins engenders there. So the consummation of the rape, a shudder in the loins. And what comes out of this rape? The broken wall, the burning roof and tower, and Agamemnon dead. So in this moment is the beginning of, again, what is the greatest about ancient Greek culture, but also the fall of it, Agamemnon dying. Being so caught up, so mastered by the brute blood of the air, did she, LEDA, put on his knowledge with the power before the indifferent beak could let her drop? So the question is, does this woman, the victim of this godly violence, have any understanding of the significance of this event? Did she put on knowledge while suffering the power? No. And the god, Zeus, indifferently lets her drop. The idea being that there are energies, there are forces, there are patterns at play that are in some ways indifferent to human suffering on an individual level, but also structure human history on a more collective level. So this is a very important moment in Yeats's myth-making because it's part of a larger myth of an idea that almost every 2,000 years there's a shift in the way that culture functions. And the shift is marked by interactions between a bird and a human, odd as that sounds. So this marker of the beginning and end of classical Greek culture is marked by a moment of Zeus as swan raping LEDA. What's the age? What's the historical period after the classical Greek period? It's the Christian period. And the Christian period is marked by God in the form of a dove, often in paintings of the Annunciation, Mary becoming impregnated by God. Often in those paintings, the God is symbolized as a dove. So a dove comes down and impregnates Mary. There's not the rape here, but there's still an idea that God in the form of a bird impregnates a woman. And of course, Mary giving birth to Jesus. This is both the acme of Christian culture and also the downfall of Christian culture. So for Yeats, every 2,000 years there's an historical period, and at the very beginning of it, plants the seeds of what is greatest about that culture, but also the downfall of that culture at the same time. So given this, he started thinking about history unfolding as two interlocking gyres. He said gyre. So if you can think of, I can't really do it with my hands, right? You can think about one gyre here and another gyre here, and they're interlocking almost like an hourglass. The idea being that a gyre symbolizes one whole age, and the other gyre interlocking within it symbolizes the other age that will grow out of this age and oppose this age. You might ask, why did Yeats come up with this? Well, it is a construct. It is an imaginative way of thinking about history that helps us realize that what seems to be the nightmarish chaos of history actually is unfolding because of a pattern. Can we verify that history is patterned by interlocking gyres? No. But if we imagine it with enough vividness and conviction, we might come to believe that this is the case, and it might offer us comfort. Remember, I said that Wallace Stevens, an American contemporary of Yeats, said that poetry provides necessary fictions without which we could not live. The poet is a necessary angel who gives us the fictions that make life meaningful. Without the imagination of the poet, without the poems the poet makes, life is meaningless. And so Yeats is ultimately saying the same thing, but he's creating an actual systematic mythology in a way that Wallace Stevens would not. Now, another poem that manifests this idea is The Second Coming, where here Yeats imagines the end of the Christian age, which is coming really soon. The poem was written in 1920. This is after World War One. World War II is on the way. This beast that we see here seems to manifest what the world will be like after Christianity. If Christianity values humility and charity and love, this rough beast in The Second Coming is the opposite. Turning and turning in the widening gyre. Again, this is the poem, The Second Coming. Turning and turning in the widening gyre. So he opens his poem by imagining history turning in this gyre. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Oh, things are falling apart. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dim tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. It's a terrible time. Things are falling apart. Think of World War One. World War II is on the way. Fascism is on the move in the land. This age of Christianity is about to end. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming here is not Jesus coming. It's the opposite of Jesus. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Spiritus Mundi means world spirit. There's an idea that there's some kind of almost like a Jungian collective unconscious of symbols is now entering into the poet's mind. A vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. And somewhere in sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its sloth eyes, while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, the cradle in which Jesus was born. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. The opposite of Jesus is now on the way to Bethlehem to be born, and another age will come in. Right? And notice that there are indignant desert birds flying around this creature with the shape of a lion body and the head of a man, a monster. So there again we have birds interacting with humans, and we have the opposite of what the Christian age was. Now, those are Yeats's great mythological poems, and there are others. Another way that Yeats began to think of the power of art was in how it can help us as we age. And that's what the poem Sailing to Byzantium is about, where Yeats, the speaker, is an old man. He can no longer participate in the fertile activities of the young. So what does he want to do? He says, I want to get out of this world, and I want to become a work of art. I want to be a mechanical bird. This is Yeats's take on Keats's Ode to a Nightingale. He says, I would like to be a mechanical bird. In other words, I would like to somehow live in art. Now, does this mean escape from art, like the romantic Yeats? No. He says, I want to be a mechanical bird. He says, this is Sailing to Byzantium. He says, once out of nature, I shall never take my bodily form from any natural thing, but such a form as Grecian goldsmiths make of hammered gold and gold enameling, to keep a drowsy emperor awake, or set upon a golden bough to sing to lords and ladies of Byzantium of what is past or passing or to come. So he doesn't want to escape time. He wants to sing of what is past, passing, or to come in hopes of well. Keeping a drowsy emperor awake, that's a pretty grim idea of the lack of power his language might have. But there's still a sense that the mechanical bird will sing of history. The mechanical bird will sing of history in such a way as to tell us what the relationship of the past and the present and the future might be. So many of Yeats's later poems are about the power of art to make sense of life, not to get us out of life, but to make sense of life. Lead in the Swan, Second Coming, Sailing to Byzantium. Circus Animals Desertion would be another one. The poem Byzantium would be another. Lapis Lazuli would be another. These are all poems about the power of art to make sense of life. And that is what Yeats was about in his third phase.